Good evening all. I welcome all the attendees in this webinar, learning series organized by Vijay Law Associates. The topic for today is access to justice during lockdown. How we do attend the courts when we are in lockdown? How can our police, legal aid practitioners, and the court staff providing services in a safest manner while we are still maintaining in this lockdown and access to justice time? And to discuss on this topic, we have with us Mr. P.K. Malhotra, former Law Secretary of India, Government of India. And Sir is the best person to talk about this topic. And I wish to tell you why. There is a reason. P.K. Malhotra sir has been more than 40 years of experience in the field of law on various capacities, out of which he has worked in Ministry of Law and Justice for more than 25 years as an officer of Indian Legal Services, which is the apex level of Union Secretary. He was responsible for the processing of finalizing many important legislation, including Criminal Law Amendment Act, Constitution Amendment relating to National Judicial Amendment Commission, Companies Act 2013, Representation of People Amendment Bill, Commercial Court Acts 2015, Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Act 2015, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, Constitution Amendment relating to GST, Securities Law Amendment Act, Consumer Protection Bill, and many other important legislation. As Secretary in the Legislative Department, he was dealing with all matters relating to the election law, including received from the Election Commission of India and litigation matters relating to the elections law. P.K. Malhotra sir had several key positions such as Secretary Minister of Law and Justice, Member Law Commission of India, and Member Securities Appellant Tribunal Mumbai, Judicial Member Income Tax Tribunal Appellant Tribunal, Arbitration and Appellant Authority under the Permanent Machinery of Arbitration of Government of India, PMA, in more than 100 of arbitration matters. His overseas assignment, including that being head of Indian delegation, Vienna and New York, to participate in meeting of UNICITL relating to arbitration, conciliation, and mediation. Mr. Malhotra represented India before WTO dispute resolution panel in Geneva in dispute between India and EU. He has also participated in several meetings related to bilateral investment agreement with USA, Australia, Hong Kong, China, Oman, and some other countries. He also negotiated mutual legal assistance treaty in criminal matters with Philippines and dealt with double taxation avoidance agreement with different countries. Mr. P.K. Malhotra received gold medal by the Delhi University for securing highest marks in diploma in international law examination held in Delhi University. Mr. P.K. Malhotra has held a master's degree in political science along with an LLM diploma in international law. It is indeed a privilege for us to have with us P.K. Malhotra sir. I welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Thank you, Vineet. Dear participants, a very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks, Vineet, for that introduction which you have given to the participants about me. And I'm really humbled by the way you have presented my CV. Now, I also thank you, Mr. Vineet, for holding this webinar by the Vijay Law Associates on an important topic of access to justice during lockdown. I think this is the most burning topic as on today, and I have been participating in some other webinars, and most of them are interested in knowing that during the lockdown period, the situation which has been created, are we really trying to enforce the fundamental rights of the individual, which the Constitution of India has given, or there has been violation of the fundamental rights of the individual, as the kind of action which has been taken by lockdown declared without sufficient notice, because it has taken right of livelihood of lakhs of people in the country, and they are starving and they have to travel from one place to another place. Now, let me put a caveat here. Whenever there is an extraordinary situation created in the country, it has to be dealt with by extraordinary means. Whether the lockdown declared was in accordance with the law, and has it really taken away your right to life, as is being said? Because can you think of right to life and right to livelihood in a different way, on a different parameters? You don't have life. If you don't have livelihood, you will not have life. And if you don't have life, then your livelihood right is also gone. Now, let me first devote a few minutes on the situation which has arisen. As all of us know, that it was in December 2019 that China reported the cases of unusual pneumonia to WHO, World Health Organization. And it spread to other parts of the world. And the World Health Organization, WHO, declared a public health emergency of international concern and named it as COVID-19. As per the latest information, more than 4.5 million people are affected, more than 3 lakh are dead, and India is also going to touch a figure of 1 lakh people who are affected by it. But I think thanks to the government machinery, that timely action was taken and lockdown was declared, which resulted in lesser casualty and lesser people being affected by this virus. Had this lockdown been delayed, or had people been allowed to move from one place to another place in the initial days, there was an apprehension probably the virus could have spread more, and probably it could have taken more lives. I think from that point of view, probably the step taken by the government need to be appreciated, because whatever options were available to the government, probably declaring an immediate lockdown after the World Health Organization declared it as an international pandemic, I think was the most desired and required step which the government has taken. The question is, everything or all life activities came to a standstill, and more particularly now, because we are talking about the access to justice, our judicial system also came to a standstill. Now, talking of if executive is working, if legislature is working, and more particularly when we are talking of a welfare state, India being a welfare state, which our constitution has declared, was it necessary that the total working of the judiciary should also come to a standstill? I think probably that is the question which we have to ponder upon when we are talking about access to justice. Now, if we are talking about access to justice, I think I will devote a few minutes on talking about the constitutional framework which our constitution has created. First of all, I would refer to the preamble of the constitution, which talks about justice, social, economic, and political. Mind it, I know most of the participants who are here are either law students or law practitioners. And you know, we call our constitution as a living document. Therefore, as and when situation arises, our courts have been interpreting the constitution in a way that it carries out the objectives of the constitution, and it gives effect to the fundamental rights enshrined in the constitution, as well as the directive principles of state policy, which are enshrined in the constitution part 3 and part 4 of the constitution. Now, when I'm talking of justice, social, economic, and political, and you may be knowing that our constitution framers, I think they devoted a lot of time when they wrote this preamble to the constitution, and as per the later interpretation given to it, it is the basic structure of the constitution. And in case any of the provision of the constitution is to be interpreted, we always interpret it in a fashion that it carries out the objectives which are listed in the preamble. Fundamental right or directive principle, as I said, are most important part of our constitution. They also form basic structure of the constitution. And the right to life, Article 21, has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to include so many rights in this right to life. And if you look, I think you can write a thesis of almost 20 volumes on the judgments given by the Supreme Court on right to life and right to health, right to livelihood, right to work, right to medical treatment, right to free legal aid. All these rights have been read by the Supreme Court in right to life. Because once you are talking of right to life, you are not talking of right to life in a vegetative state. The Supreme Court has said, well, you have a right to education. Of course, right to education has now been incorporated separately into the Constitution as a fundamental right. But earlier also, it was read as a right to life. Similarly, right to livelihood also. And to give effect to the directive principle of state policy, I'm talking more particularly about Article 39A, that is equal justice and free legal aid. And if you have to give equal justice and free legal aid, and also I'm drawing your attention to Article 41 of the Constitution, which talks about right to work, to education, and public assistance in certain cases. So I think all this is there to be given effect. So government has to take its steps in a way that right to livelihood of individual is also not taken away, and to give effect to deal with this kind of emergent situation which has arisen, because we have little paucity of time. Therefore, I will not devote much time on this, but definitely passing reference to all this background becomes necessary so that we understand that under what circumstances immediate steps were needed, and whether the steps taken by the judiciary as well as by the executive were in the right direction or not, and what is the way forward. Because right now, today, we are talking about access to justice during lockdown only. But I think even when the lockdown is over, maybe after 17, we are going to have the fourth phase of lockdown, where probably the conditions may be relaxed. But the fact remains, coronavirus will not go. So probably the kind of ecosystem which has been created, or kind of precautions which we are required to take to protect our right to life and to protect ourselves from the virus, those requirements or those conditions will continue, although so far as the opening of the businesses, opening of the work, as well as opening of the legal system or the courts is concerned, that will start. I'm expecting it will happen that way. But the fact remains, so far as the functioning of the court or judiciary is concerned, the moment this lockdown was declared, there were many public interest litigations which were filed in the court. And it was said that by declaring this lockdown, our right to life has been taken away. Well, again, I mean, at cost of repetition, let me say, right to life, when you are talking of, right to life will remain, and right to livelihood will remain only when you have the life. And to save your life, if certain steps have been taken by the government, and in accordance with the law which has been passed by the parliament, can we say that can it be said that it is not a reasonable restriction, although the right to life is without any restriction? And mind it, I mean, if those who have read the constitutional history and who have read the debate about the Article 19 and 21, of course, 21 is without any restriction, but because it is right to life can be taken away only in accordance with the due process of law, whereas there are certain freedoms given to you under Article 19, which are all subject to all reasonable restriction, which can be imposed under Article 19(2). So Article 21 stands on a much higher footing. So if you are allowed access to justice also by declaring lockdown, does your right is really affected? Now I would like to draw your attention to two enactments passed by the parliament, one by the parliament and one is of 19th century law, pre-independence law, which is still in existence, under which the government has passed orders imposing various restrictions and curtailing our rights. The two acts I'm referring is, one is of course of 19th century vintage. It is known as Epidemic Disease Act of 1897. Under the government of India has passed orders from time to time. And recently, by issuing an ordinance, more power has been given to the government under this act to deal with this kind of unprecedented situation. And the second is Disaster Management Act. Whenever a disaster takes place, how that disaster will be managed, the different level, at the central level, at the state level, at the district level, committees have been constituted and they are empowered to issue orders to ensure that disaster is controlled and right to life of the individual is not affected. Now, coming back to the legal system about which we are concerned today, I think the more important point is the initiative taken by the judiciary itself in the power given to it under the Constitution. Now, once I'm talking about the independence of judiciary and the power given to it under the Constitution, because this is again an organ of the government and it derives its authority from the various provisions of the Constitution, the exercise of its power given under Article 142 of the Constitution, the Supreme Court suo motu has given instruction to ensure that people's right to life or to approach a court in case there is their rights are violated is not taken away. And therefore, the process of holding cases through video conferences was approved by the Supreme Court. Now, mind it, let me give you a little background of it. So far as use of information and communication technology in the judiciary is concerned, it is a new concept. It is an old concept. The government started its effort of providing information and communication use of information and communication technology in the judiciary way back in mid-90s. And I remember when Justice Lahoti was the Chief Justice of India, he specifically constituted a e-court committee at the Supreme Court level, as well as directed all the Chief Justices of the High Courts to constitute e-courts in the High Courts to ensure that information technology is used in day-to-day functioning of the court. But at that time, the only objective was to do computerization of the court, to ensure that the cause list is available on the internet, to see that the judgments are available through internet. But so far as functioning of the court is concerned, I think it was never conceived that way, and probably there were reasons for that. So the two main reasons were, one was the technical glitches which we had, or kind of technical expertise which were, or infrastructure which was needed. That kind of technical infrastructure was not available to the courts. The second was the reluctance on the part of some of the judges as well as some of the advocates to use information technology in day-to-day working of the courts. But slowly, once the system picked up, when the system little bit matured and people came to know about the advantages which are there in using technology in day-to-day functioning of the court started insisting on filing of documents in electronic mode. And I think that process also succeeded. And now, almost for the 10 years, the system is there are many routine cases which are attended through video conferences. Take, for example, if somebody's remand is to be extended, it is always done through video conferences in metropolitan towns, and to save a lot of money in bringing the prisoners to the courtroom, and the security concern is also there. Through video conferencing, the remand cases are taken up. Similarly, if evidence is to be recorded and the witness is outside the country, more particularly in family matters, there is provision for recording of evidence through video conferencing. And there are many other cases, petty matters like challans under the Municipal Corporation Act, or maybe under the Motor Vehicle Act, and other petty matters. They can be attended through video conferencing. But before that also, filing of e-documents became very important. And I must share with you that not only it is not only High Court and the Supreme Court, but even at the district court level also, this process has started about a decade back, and in some areas it is working successfully. Yes, there are technical problems and there may be issues. Some of the participants who are here may ask me about the security of the system or the kind of privacy which need to be maintained. I think these are the issues which are yet to be addressed. But I think before this COVID-19, probably we have never thought that way, or even if we have thought, we have never thought of implementing the hearing of the cases through video conferencing. So probably on the one hand, coronavirus has created a havoc in the country. On the other hand, it has brought many opportunities in various fields to use more and more technology for the benefit of the people. Now, as on today, after the direction given by the Supreme Court, and I think it's very important for all of us to know, the participants who are participating in the conference may be interested in knowing the order which have been passed by benches, the Chief Justice of India and another bench of Justice Chandrachud and Justice Nageshwar Rao, permitting use of video conferencing, although it may not be a perfect system as on today, because kind of video conferencing which we are needing as on today, like you should have a big screen where probably the display is in a proper way. On the one side, you have a copy of the petition and the document. On the other hand, you can display the judgments which you are referring to or you are highlighting. Probably all these things you will take time. But COVID has given us an opportunity where as on today, people are willing to attend to cases through video conferencing also. And the legal backing, of course, it is already available under the amendment made in the Evidence Act to the amendments made in the Information Technology Act of 2008. Probably all the participants may be aware about it. When this process started, when the Information Technology Act was enacted in 2002, its intention was only to recognize certain electronic documents in an evidence. But later on in 2008, when the amendments were made, many of the electronic documents, their evidential value, it was given a legal backing, and certain offenses were also created in case the person is misusing the electronic format, electronic platform. So if somebody is using the electronic platform, not in accordance with the law, but he's misusing it, obviously he can be punished under the Information Technology Act also. Now, some of the observations which Supreme Court has made while passing an order under 142. Now, Article 142, as all of you are aware, empowers the Supreme Court to issue direction to render complete justice. Of course, in some of the cases in the past, I have been critical in the power being used by the Supreme Court under Article 142 in various cases. But I think this is the right case where this power has been rightly exercised by the Supreme Court in giving a direction so that doors of justice are open to the legal fraternity as well as the litigant and the persons who are affected by the orders so that they can get justice from the court. And this is what I would like to make some of the observations which are made by the Supreme Court in this case. And it says, it passed a number of directions and it said that all courts across India, it said that the top court and all high courts are authorized to adopt measures required to ensure robust functioning of judicial system through the use of video conferencing. Observing that technology is here to stay, the top court passed the direction by exercising its plenary power under Article 142 of the Constitution and said that all measures which shall be taken by the courts to reduce the physical presence of stakeholders within its premises shall be deemed to be lawful. A bench headed by Chief Justice S.A. Bobde further said, consistent with the peculiarities of the judicial system in every state and the dynamically developing public health situation, every high court would be authorized to determine the modalities suitable to the temporary transition to the use of video conferencing technology. All measures that have been and shall be taken by this court, that is the Supreme Court and the high courts, to reduce the need for the physical presence of all stakeholders within court premises and to secure the functioning of courts in consonance with the social distancing guidelines and best public health practices shall be deemed to be lawful. This is again an observation made by a bench comprising of Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and Justice L. Nageshwar Rao. The bench further said that outbreak of coronavirus or COVID-19 in several countries, including India, has necessitated immediate adoption of measures to ensure social distancing to prevent transmission of the virus, and the top court as well as the high courts have adopted the measures to reduce physical presence. I'll further point one more observation made by the court, which is again important from the point of view of access to justice. It said, access to justice is fundamental to preserve the rule of law in the democracy and visaged by the Constitution of India. The challenges occasioned by the outbreak of COVID-19 have to be addressed while preserving the constitutional commitment to ensuring the delivery of and access to justice to those who seek it. It further said that the court hearings in congregation must necessarily become an exception during this period. The court further directed that district courts in each state shall adopt the mode of video conferencing prescribed by the concerned high courts. The concerned courts shall maintain a helpline to ensure that any complaint regard to the quality and audibility of feed shall be communicated during the proceeding or immediate thereafter its conclusion, failing which no grievance in regard to it shall be entertained thereafter. The bench directed that court shall duly notify and make available the facilities for video conferencing for which litigant who do not have the means or access to such facility. Now, mind it, I mean, you may ask me a question. Well, I think this kind of functioning has probably created a digital divide in the country between haves and have-nots. Probably the kind of facility which we are having of video conferencing in our country is available either in the metropolitan cities or maybe in bigger towns, and probably it is not available in the villages. But so far as the court system is concerned, let me assure you that this e-courts project, which was implemented by the government of India, and all courts have already implemented, even to the lowest judge in the court hierarchy, that is the Munsif, the infrastructure has been provided to them. Well, there may be certain area where it is not functioning properly, and therefore, in day-to-day functioning, it may not be possible to 100% switch over to technology so far as rendering access to justice is concerned. But wherever it is possible, I think it is the right time. COVID-19 has given us this opportunity to implement it. And I can share my own experience that there was a time about 5-6 years back when I was participating in a meeting, and very senior judges objected to video conferencing of the proceedings in the court, maybe for certain reasons which may be valid, or maybe certain reasons which we may not accept, and judges may have their own reservation for it. But I think the kind of discipline which video conferencing of cases will bring will be much better as compared to the physical courts. Now, there are certain issues relating to it, and I would like to highlight those issues also, because they become very, very relevant when it comes to implementation. And all of us sitting in Delhi, I know when we are holding this webinar, we are holding this webinar because of the COVID situation. Had COVID situation not been there, probably we would have been sitting in some seminar in some India Habitat Center or maybe India International Center and interacting face to face. But COVID provided us this opportunity, and we are working successfully. If this can work successfully, probably it can work in the courts also. Yes, there are certain security concerns which need to be addressed, and the digital divide which is there, probably that also need to be taken care of, and this will come with the passage of time. Now, I think the authorities which have been created under the Legal Services Authorities Act can play a big role so far as this digital divide is concerned. Probably the State Legal Service Authority, the District Legal Service Authority can provide a platform where even the advocates can get training, and the people who don't have access to the technology, they can approach the District Legal Service Authority, and using the infrastructure of the District Legal Service Authority or the State Legal Authority, probably this justice rendering system can be taken advantage of. And so far as training of the judges is concerned, I think the National Judicial Academy and the state judicial academies are also playing a big role. And probably they can also be authorized to impart more and more training and create a kind of technical infrastructure which is more robust, which is more user friendly, and which is more secure as compared to the system, public system, which is being used as on today. Another point which I would like to make here is, so far as the rendering justice is concerned, so far as the legal provision is concerned, I think there is no change. It remains the same. Only thing is, instead of physical platform, now you are using a technical platform. Mind it, technology is only a tool. Till the time we use this as a tool, it is definitely going to help us in achieving our objective. But the moment technology becomes our master and we become slave of technology, probably the object of rendering justice, or for that matter in any other field, wherever we may be using it, probably will not be served to the best of requirement as our society needs. So therefore, technology needs to be used as a tool. Somebody may ask me that tomorrow, suppose this technology and all, is it possible that all kinds of cases can be heard through video conferences? I will say that stage has not yet come. Yes, routine cases are being heard. Even some of the tribunals are hearing cases through video conferences where recording of evidence is not required, or it is a second appeal matter, or it is a petty case, or it is a small dispute, say under the Motor Vehicle Act. Probably all these disputes can be settled through video conferences. It will save time of the court. It will save time of the judge. It will save a lot of expenses on transportation. It will save a lot on travel time also. And probably the decision in the cases will be much quicker, and the large pendency which we are talking of in the courts can also be reduced by using it. So I think we are at a stage where probably we will have to use a hybrid model. When I say hybrid model, wherever technology can be used, using the technology, start deciding cases through video conferencing. This is a good opportunity. And wherever it can't be done, probably the normal physical courts can function, even during the COVID time also, by following the protocol which has been laid down, maintaining distance, using masks, and restricting the number of people who are entering the courtroom. This can be done. Now, problem is, can you lay down strict guidelines as on today? I think probably as on today, strict guidelines as to what cases can be taken up through video conferencing and what cases should be taken up quickly through, this on in the court's physical form. Probably today you cannot lay down a strict guidelines because we are in a changing scenario. In a changing scenario, you have to give discretion to somebody. And who is the right authority who should be given that discretion as on today? And I think it is the court. We should be given that kind of discretion. If both the parties agree, the court can decide all these cases through video conferencing. Filing is already being done. Even today, I have read in the newspaper that Delhi High Court has said, of course, they are extending the lockdown so far as the court is concerned, functioning with the court is concerned, by another week. But the number of courts which will be functioning through video conferencing has been increased to 10. And I think this is happening in almost all the courts. It's not that the video conferencing was not taking place earlier. Earlier, it was an exception, and probably time has come when we should make it a rule, with the exception that physical courts will function only where it is absolutely essential, and rest of the job will be done through video conferencing. I think I want to say many other things also, but because there is a time constraint and we have a limited time at our disposal, maybe I'll leave some time for question answers by the participant. In case there are any questions, I would like to answer those questions to the best of my ability. But I think the way forward is hybrid model is best suited to our country, and we have to go over the physical court. At the same time, we have to increase and we have to equip ourselves as professionals, as legal persons, to see that justice is given even to those persons through the systems which are available, by using the infrastructure which has been created, even by the NGOs, even by the voluntary organizations. or by the state legal service authority or the district legal service authority. I think the judiciary has a very good future, and this will be one way by which pendency in the courts can be reduced. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for this enlightening session, sir. I request all the attendees, if anyone wish to ask any question, they can write down in chat box. We are open. Sir, in between, we have received some question on email.
Yes, please.
I just put it to you. So one of the participant has asked that, what is your opinion in respect of violation of human rights laws when we are talking about this migrant labor issue during this particular time?
Yes, I think Vinay, this is a very important question. And as I said, extraordinary situations need to be dealt with extraordinarily. Now, the government had two options. One was to allow all the migrant labor to move back to their houses before the lockdown is declared so that they can stay safe in their own housing. That was one option available to the government. But with that option having been exercised, were we in a position to control the death or reduce the number of deaths or to stop the spread of coronavirus? Probably the government thought probably there are more chances of coronavirus being spread throughout the length and breadth of the country by the people who are migrating from one state to another state, and the casualties will be much large. To stop that, it became necessary for the government that the migrant workers should continue to stay where they are so that they are taken care of there itself. Yes, there was a possibility, probably the government could have prepared itself in a better way to provide for their residence, for their shelter, for their food, and for their health care. On that count, probably states were equally responsible, and the response could have been much better. But I think with the passage of time, all those things were taken care of. But yes, people were scared. Those who lost their job, who were without money, they thought probably going back to their houses is much better. But frankly speaking, this kind of restriction, because the law permits it, the two laws which I mentioned, that the Epidemic Act of 1785 and the 1895, sorry, and the 2015 Disaster Management Act, both of them empower the government to restrict the movement of persons. But once you restrict the movement of persons, then state is obliged to carry out its duties and obligation under the Constitution placed on it under the directive principle of state policy, providing legal aid, providing shelter, providing food, providing health care. If that is done, I don't see any kind of right can be said to be violated.
So I think this participant has a very good answer of this the question. So one more very important question is that you have talking about the facilities for providing this during this time, doing all this online video conferencing hearings and all. But still, there is a question by one of our participants: is can it be good at this particular time, the video conferencing, when the infrastructure has not been provided to the advocates and the judicial officers out of the metropolitan cities?
Vineet, I think that's another very valid question, and of course I touched about it in my discussion also. You see, as I said, COVID has given us an opportunity. The project of e-courts has been going on since mid-90s, as I said earlier also, but somehow it was not taking off. So the option were two: either you totally shut down the system because of the lockdown declared by the government, or use alternate methods available to you, howsoever imperfect they may be, howsoever unsecure they may be, so that at least the important matters which need immediate attention can be attended to. I think the judiciary, by passing, or the Supreme Court, by passing a direction under Article 142, has given that authority to all the courts throughout the country to use the video conferencing mechanism which is available. maybe in the times to come, probably we will have to create our own infrastructure, which is more secure, more perfect, and more accessible. And for that, as I said, the National Judicial Academy, the State Judicial Academy, the National Legal Service Authority, State Legal Service Authority, District Legal Service Authority, and even most of the big law firms, they can take a lead and they can provide that kind of platform so that litigant can approach the counsel sitting in his chamber also. He can attend the hearing if he doesn't have any other infrastructure available to him.
So one more very important and very relevant question is there. So,
Yes.
what is your opinion about this thing that during this COVID-19, the legislative has not been working in proper manner? They cannot work basically. So, it is affected upon the regular work taken place by implementing laws, creating new laws, implementing of different uh, welfare schemes and all. What is your view on this, sir? How can it be possible to make it will how much time will be taken to where normal situation has been come?
As all of us know, so far as COVID-19 is concerned, it is going to stay because no medicine so far has come out which can treat COVID-19. Like other viruses, this virus will also continue for some time to come till we are able to have a medicine for its cure, for its treatment. Till then, obviously, we have to take precautions and we have to live with it. If you have to take precautions, there will be certain restrictions will be observed. And once you are observing those certain restrictions, probably normal functioning, not only of the courts, even of the offices, even of the parliament may not be possible. Now take for example, in today itself, I was reading in the newspaper that one of the country has held its parliamentary proceedings through video conferencing. And all the MPs, because they had put a big screen, all the MPs can be seen on the screen. But can you hold this kind of video conferencing and hold your parliament sitting by holding a video conferencing in India because of sheer number? Is it possible? I think probably advanced technology will have to be used and maybe we are able to do that. But so far as the court functioning is concerned, yes, for the time being, people will have to suffer. The normal cases will be delayed, but urgent matters will be taken up since we have to live with this COVID situation. But this situation cannot continue for a long time. You must have seen after phase 2, there were certain relaxations given by the government for opening the market, for functioning of the doctor, for transportation also, for migrant worker also. And now after this, when the 4th phase is declared, I can understand that probably conditions will be still relaxed. In those relaxed conditions, probably normal functioning in the courts will also start. But only thing is all those protocols which are necessary to be maintained or followed for gathering of people or for maintaining distance, all things will have to be done. And that will definitely affect the functioning of the court for some time to come.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Vishal Jindal, Malhotra sir.
Vishal, good afternoon. Good to see you here.
Honor is mine, sir. Sir, generally talking, we have been seeing that numerous industries and numerous sectors has come out with some kind of exit protocol. That is correct that government of India is giving a lot of relaxation, but at the same time, we are also seeing the continued increase in the number of the COVID infectants. So accordingly, industries have set up their own protocols, how to handle this thing, how the staff will work, the labor will work, who will go in, who will go out. But is there something like this which has been defined by judiciary per se at this point of time, perceiving that, for example, only those litigants will be able to come who has their cases lying up next to ours, kind of thing, or very selective audience will be there. Perhaps if that kind of protocol can be defined, it might be perhaps helpful to take the certain kind of pace on the whole environment, sir.
I think the order which I was referring to during my talk, passed by the Chief Justice of India, specifically provide for it. And I am going to read some of the portion where it says, if necessary, in appropriate courts may appoint amicus curiae and make video conferencing facilities available to advocates. No, it is somewhere else. I think, let me find out where it is. Where the court has specifically said that the courts can take a discretion and decide how many cases should be, which cases should be heard first. Suppose only the advocate and his client is to be allowed and no other person will be allowed to enter the court. This is a restriction which is imposed because of the extraordinary situation created. You cannot be allowed the court to be crowded, which will violate the instructions or the order issued by the state government or the central government under the Disaster Management Act. So the discretion has been given to the court, and that kind of restriction which is imposed will be valid because of the order passed by the Supreme Court.
Sir, we also saw, in the few cases which were heard in the Supreme Court and Delhi High Court, through media, we learned that there have been challenges of poor connectivity because, the litigant was at one position, their advocate was into some other position. So perhaps the courts can also help with, providing certain kind of infrastructure within their own premises in a segregated way, where the judges in their chambers can see it. Can proceed with the proceedings, and there are 8 or 10 cubicles, or some kind, like we are all seeing isolation wards kind of thing. So similar same 10-15 wards can be isolation wards kind of infrastructure cubicles can be placed, which can work as a point-to-point connectivity between the advocates, the litigant and the judges. So that might be helpful to also maintain the social distance and also expedite the overall process without the hiccups of infrastructure bandwidth restrictions.
I entirely agree with you. If COVID-19 situation continue for a long time, probably this is one of the methodology which can be adopted for hearing of cases in a better way. But in case the conditions are relaxed, yes, in the long term, the kind of suggestion which you have given need to be implemented. Until the time COVID-19 continue, following the protocol, the kind of infrastructure which you are thinking of can be created in the court so that cases can be heard on regular basis. I think that's a very good suggestion, and probably those who are responsible for its implementation can take note of this suggestion. I agree with you. Yes, Vineet.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this inciting session. And I thank all the participants for posting your queries on email. You can see the recorded version of this webinar on our social media accounts like YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So be safe, be healthy. Thank you, sir. Thank you all the participants. We'll meet again on some other webinar. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vishal.
Thank you very much.